What's up, guys? D2 from D2AOV.com here with your June 2019 Arena Valor Hero tier list. Yes, I can read titles. I actually did write this one, unlike the April one that I only had the video version. Obviously, if you guys watched that one, it was because I really needed more professional games to help me out with evaluating everything. And I didn't think that... I thought I was going to be wrong with my placements after professionals started playing. Turns out I was mostly right, which is nice to know. As for this one, after I posted it last Friday, my time, someone posted it to Reddit for me, so thank you, that guy or girl. And there were a couple of criticisms which I don't necessarily agree with, and I'll address them now, so perhaps maybe you have the same thoughts as those people on Reddit, and so maybe you'll get your answer here. So yeah, let's get through it. First thing I'll say is that I do not have Yina on this list yet, but my initial thoughts are that she is probably going to be in S, maybe high S, maybe even SS. She is very, very good. Let me know what you think about her in the comments. But those are my initial thoughts. Make sure you check back to the list when I do add her, which should be at most like 2 weeks, but I know that sounds like a long time, but I do need time to evaluate these things, right? So probably in about a week I'll be able to add her. All right, so let's get on to it. Overview is pretty much the same, except for me just apologizing for being too late. So the big change is that I added hero difficulty levels, kind of similar to how Doizer, the Thai streamer, has his list. And along with that, I removed the plus symbol, which showed which heroes were like extremely hard to use. Now I actually have a continuum from easy to very hard, and part of that is because if you are a new or just not very mechanically skilled player, then you're probably better off playing a hero in like tier 2 who is like easy to play than a hero in S who is hard to play, right? You're probably gonna have better results. So just kind of read it more carefully. Make sure you're not kind of overstepping. And if you do, I mean, obviously you're allowed to play whoever you want, but if you do come across a hero who have deemed, hard or very hard, make sure you get a lot of practice in before you play them in matches. And don't, if you start failing, it's not necessarily that the hero's bad. It's probably that you're not playing it to the full potential. Next note I had is that there are lots of mid heroes that you can play. Malik, Neoma, Varus, Hayate, Tel'Annas. Max is kind of a joke. He just saw time in the RPL in the finals. But, yeah. This is kind of just... I mean, this is just something I remarked on. Really, the big thing here is that as long as you have a hero who can clear the mid-wave safely and is a good fighter, they don't necessarily need to be a mage. One of the caveats with this, though, is that you either need to have a mage jungler or you need to finish the game very quickly. So the more likely scenario out of that in your standard ladder game is to have a mage jungler, or for some reason you stick your mage in like the abyssal lane in order to deal with some problematic opposing abyssal lane, something like that. That's probably a harder thing to coordinate in a ladder game, but maybe you have good communication. I don't know. The most likely situation would have a mage jungler, and yeah, basically just having a good fighter in mid and having like the roam with the support is very, very strong now. It's kind of hard to figure out in the draft, but if you can pull it off, then make sure you try that. Just make sure that you're ready for perhaps some blowback when people are like, "What are you doing? You can't play Malik mid." Then just, I guess, link them to this tier list. The other thing is that I have heroes in like a couple of roles. Some of their second roles are like kind of bad. Like it's really hard for them to play that. For some heroes like supports, I just don't even list the second role because I usually never do that. But some are not as good as others. But I don't like to. I was thinking for several tier lists now to maybe specify like, oh, you should really try not to play at this lane or this role if you can. But then I decided against it because things change all the time. And I don't really want to be telling people what to do, especially if they can maybe innovate something strong. Heroes with 3 roles. If I went out of my way to write 3 roles, then they're good at all 3. Another thing I want to say about this is that the fact that there's like all these random new mid heroes, and that was born out of innovation in the RPL. And, you know, some other people were doing that too around the world. But this is why I specifically don't have my tier list in different roles, because it really just cuts off innovation, and it really just first of all, it's confusing, right? It's like, oh, is he good in he's good in this role but not really good in that role, and it's like heroes are just, they're pretty good the way they are. You can kind of just take off a little bit depending on, I mean, you can maybe subtract a little bit of effectiveness based on, you know, whether they're playing in their primary or secondary role. But honestly, their heroes are good if they're good, and you should be able to play them wherever you want. I don't want to be restricting people. Like, if you look at Doiser, some of his recent tier lists, it's so confusing, because you have like things split up where people are like in mid, but there's like a double portrait. It's just so confusing. So I'd rather just rate them 1 through whatever, and then I give you the roles, and then you can play them where you want. Next point is that situational mages are really strong now. And this is kind of similar to what I mentioned here on the loss of overlap part, where someone in a lower tier can a lot of times be better than someone in like tier S. Like, for someone in tier 1 or tier 2 can be better than the heroes in tier S, and that's what I mentioned here. But mages in particular are what you see, particularly in pro games, right? Where the mages in tier S and to a lesser extent in tier 1 are good all-around mages, and they can be good in most situations, and there's never going to be a game where they're terrible. But in tiers 1 and 2, there's going to be lots of mages who you can pick for a certain situation, whether you want poke, whether you want, you know, dive, whether you want burst, whether you want sustain damage, all that kind of stuff. So I'll talk about that as just specifically when we get to them, when we start talking about the specific mages. But that doesn't mean that the mages in tier S are bad. It's just that you're seeing them less in pro play. But if you want to, especially if you're worried about your draft just going awry, and you don't really know particularly how to counter certain things, or you're unsure, and you know, everything else being equal, you know, you're just as good as at the heroes in tier S as you are in tier S and tier 2, then you're better off just playing it safe and picking a hero in tier S, because they're never going to be bad, whereas the heroes in tier 1 or 2 might be really bad in certain situations but really good in others, so you have to be really careful about that. Along those lines, I wouldn't be surprised to see anyone but the heroes in tier 4, and I guess in like some crazy situations, maybe the heroes in tier 4 in professional matches, particularly with the global pick ban system at the AWC, because they're gonna have to pick, you know, from a deeper hero pool as the games go along. And then, like I mentioned earlier, the overlap that you see. Again, this is one of those situations where, like, we'll get to it. Like, and Superman is probably the biggest example of that. Superman can easily be better than a lot of the heroes in tier 1, or excuse me, in tier S. Spoiler, he's top of tier 1. But there are definitely a lot of situations where the fact that he cannot do anything if he's not in flight mode, or he can't really be that effective, and he's really reliant. He's a DS laner that's really reliant on cooldowns, and being able to go in flight mode, and there's just ways to shut him down, whereas like everyone in tier S, you can't really shut them down. You can like you can outplay them, you can just be better than them, but you can't completely shut them down due to their hero's limitations. Whereas Superman, yes, he can be absolutely ridiculous, but there are definitely situations where he can fall short. So that's why I put him at the top at tier 1 and not in 2 tier S like everyone else. So that's I can't iterate this much. I can't say this enough. This tier list, there's a reason why I put them in certain tiers, and if I didn't do it this way, then it would be impossible to do it, because there's just you take a look at someone like Kali, right? There's games where she's so much better than certain heroes and so much worse than heroes in other situations, and you can't just, you know, that's the average. The average is where I put them, and it just happens to work out that the lower average belongs to people that are more situational. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind when you're like, I played this hero and I beat this other hero all the time. And it's like, it's not always about the matchup with that hero. First of all, you know, you can be better in different situations. It's not always about the duel. Maybe your particular hero loses to heroes that hero that you're beating doesn't lose to. It's like a rock paper scissors situation. Anyway, I'm getting all worked up for some reason. I don't know why. One more thing, I decided to add this carrot to a couple more heroes than in last list. I was thinking about adding, like, changing this to a different one. I was about to add 2 symbols and erase 1, but erase 2 and add 1, but I decided against it. And basically, yeah, you have to keep an eye on this. For instance, I stuck it on like Diao-chan because if a team's coordinated, you're gonna have a really hard time as Tel'Annas. Whereas if you're in a solo queue, or perhaps the opposing team is not as aware of like what Diao-chan's can do, then you kind of just die to her. But I'll talk about that later. All right, let's get started. Tier SS. We have 3 heroes in there. I actually mentioned this in here, but if this was a pro tier list, I would just delete tier SS and stick them on tier S, because pros have the ability to kind of deal with these 3, Hayate, Cafani, and Florentino. Yes, they're still the best heroes, but I wouldn't say that they're like insta-ban in professional play. You can still play around them. You can still kind of find a way to deal with them as long as you pick the right composition to do so. So as a default, yes, they're banned, but if you have a good strategy, then you don't need to do so. However, you can't rely on people in solo queue to be able to do that, and so it's just, you're better off just banning them, unless you're just great at dealing with them. I don't know. Anyway, Hayate moves to number 1. He was number 4 on the April tier list. He was actually, people were banning him in games before he even had the change where he could crit true damage, and that just goes to show like how amazingly good pros are at him. Now it seems like his kit is very simple, right? You have your dash, you have your first ability which does damage, and then you have a 3 which can be an escape, it can be engage tool. But I think that people are not used to that sort of kit on a marksman. It's easy to like think of a mage having like 1 big burst damage and they can dash away, something like a Liliana, right? And it seems simple enough, even though Liliana is pretty hard to use because of the way that you need to fully maximize her melee attacks. But like in a nutshell, or in a vacuum, you'd think like, oh, Hayate seems easy, but he's actually really hard because you need to have like amazing positioning as well as the ability to predict the abilities of your opponents and know when all their cooldowns are. Because if you get hit by 1 CC, you're dead. You're just absolutely dead. You're probably going to be building the war boots on him, and that means that you cannot get TC'd. You have to just completely dodge every single little thing that they throw out. And not only that, but you have to stick to them. It's not like you just throw out 1 shuriken and they're all dead. Like it's a continuous attack. You need to get 6 attacks on them, and then after that you need to finish them off. Yes, once you start getting your damage in, you just completely destroy them, and he's an absolute nightmare for melee supports. They just cannot catch up to him. But it's definitely hard to play Hayate, so just be careful about that. And that takes me to Cafani. So I have, if you can see, I have Hayate as hard and Cafani is easy. If you are below masters, pick Cafani every single time because she is way easier to use. I guess if you want the challenge and the thrill of playing Hayate and he's fun for you, then fine. But if you're just looking to win, I would say that if this were like a below masters or even like mid masters and below tier list, then Cafani would be 1. And it's not really close because she's just so much easier to use. She has all of the crutches that you would want as a newer player, because you don't have to like be dashing around like how they. All you need to do. First of all, she does have an escape tool, but apart from that, her fusillade is insane as far as aggression and defense. She can clear waves while damaging an entire team. And if that weren't enough, her pulse cannon just has crazy range and damage as well. And on top of that, like the fact that she can walk while attacking, it seems like a separate ability in and of itself, and that's just pretty nuts. So yeah, she's number 1 as if you're not like very, very high ranked or very, very highly skilled. Next is Florentino. Florentino, even though he kept getting nerfed, he still owns the DS lane. No one really can deal with him there. And there's just, like, even though he's not as great at team fighting as some other heroes, just the fact that you always have to be sending help over, or you have to be standing under tower. It's just a nuisance to deal with, and particularly in solo queue, if you're facing off against a relatively decent Florentino, the fact that you've basically lost that lane and the gravity starts kicking in and everyone has to be forced there, it's definitely problematic. So he retains his spot in tier SS. I'm going to be going quickly for some of these just to be like, he's here, that's fine. There's other ones we'll explain more in detail, but you'll kind of tell which ones that I'm kind of be like, they're just here because they're still here and there's nothing's changed. So tier S. So basically tier SS is kind of a continuation of S. They're just kind of like more powerful. There's nothing really you can do against them, particularly in solo queue. But in tier S, they're not really counterable like I mentioned, but they're not overpowered. Like, you can still deal with them and you can still obviously win games against them. But they're, like I mentioned, they're never going to be terrible in any games, but there's going to be some games in which they're not going to be the best choice. Sometimes, depending on the situation, you'd rather have a hero in tier 1 or 2. So keep that in mind. These are just the heroes with the highest floor, as it were. So we start with Richter. Richter, it almost feels like Richter deserves to be in his own tier, like tier S.5, right? Because it feels like he's higher than the rest of S, but he's like a little bit lower than these guys. He is just such a beast. He wins a lot of matchups in the lane in the beginning. There's only a couple that he loses, but you can't be perfect, right? But he wins a lot of lanes, and the funny thing is he's good the entire game, beginning, mid, and end. He's amazing. So in certain matchups, he'll lose early and win late, or he'll win early and start losing late. But like, he'll never be outright just dumpstered on in the DS lane. And he's absolutely ridiculous once it starts getting to the late game. He can dive the backline, kill 1 or 2, and get out like in the midst of an entire 5 like grouped team. So he's pretty nuts. He jumped out of tier SS, but he's perfectly in a good spot. Darcy had a hard time kind of placing because pros have a easier time dealing with him these days. If this were like a pro tier list, he'd be like maybe number 10 or so. But it's solo queue. It's much harder to play around him. If someone gets stuck in a dimensional portal, unlike pros, I don't think solo queue players are as aware to be able to stun out someone in order to save your allies. It's harder to know when he has dimensional walk up. Sometimes you just get and in the solo queue games, it's very easy to get hit by one dimensional walk in the late game, and you get absolutely chunked. And that's something that it's a bit easier to kind of coordinate if you're playing like as a team. But he stays up there because he still has ridiculous damage, and the fact that dimensional walk and dimensional portal are just kind of they're abilities that are very difficult to counter, especially if you're in solo queue. Okay, let me take a drink because I need to explain this next part. Okay, so Toulon. I feel like I had to put Toulon this high because he's doing amazingly now, but I feel like Toulon is benefiting from people being stupid, and let me explain. And this is a point that I don't think even pros understand. Toulon is flourishing because people are picking situational mages, like I mentioned before, and for good reason, right? You want to have those situational mages depending on the situation. But I think they're making a mistake when they forget the Toulon aspect when they pick their situational mages. Like, I've seen people pick backline mages like Kali and even Preda, and they pick it because they want to just be able to be defensive. And kind of fit their team comp and kind of maybe counter the other team comp in a way. But then they forget that they're going as Toulon, and like Toulon absolutely craps all over them in the early game, and it just snowballs the game. So Toulon has a much harder time against the more dynamic mages like Liliana and Raz. But because people are shying away from those two heroes recently, Toulon just like running amok over everyone else. So that all said, he still deserves to be very, very high because, unless everyone watches this video and learns a couple of things, he's still going to be able to just walk all over the situational mages that people are going to continue to pick. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on Toulon. He should be lower, but I can't in any good conscience put him lower because right now current situation, the current meta is just amazing for him because people keep picking situational mages into him. Okay, next, Tel'Annas. I honestly, I couldn't believe that she was this high. And she even passed Elsu. Spoiler, Elsu's the next one. But it's just the thing with Tel, and it's something that she has in common with Hayate and Caphany, and even the lower marksmen like Wisp or Morn or what have you, right? Is that she can 100 to 0 people, and being able to 100 to 0 like an assassin that dives you or someone, just anyone who jumps on you, is very, very important. You don't want to be sitting there, rolling around tactical firing or sniping if you're just in immediate danger. And she's able to do that. Not only is she able to do that, but she has ridiculous range while doing so. So if she catches someone in Eagle Eye, they could be just dead without having any way to deal with it, right? Because Tel's so far away. And on top of that, that range allows her to farm up to her 4 items. And if you're playing Tel, my suggestion is to go for Clavis into War Boots, into Slick Sting, into Bow Slaughter, into Desticle. I know I said 4 items. It's 4 items other than the boots. But basically, what that does is allows you to immediately get as quickly as possible to a situation where you're safe, because if you get the slicks, you're attacking super fast, so you can win most duels. And then when you get the Bow of Slaughter, even if you get dove upon, you can still heal right back up. And then Desticle basically makes you completely invulnerable, which is insane for Tel'Annas. So go for those items, and extremely hard to kill you. And like I said, because of her insane range, she's able to usually farm to those items pretty safely in her lane, like behind towers and what have you, even if she's playing 1v2. Elsu, I had to drop him. He was 1 in the last February list, but in the April he dropped a little bit. Like I mentioned, it's the same thing I mentioned before. He just can't 100-0 someone, but he's still very good. Like, if this is like one of the only metas in which Elsu wouldn't be like a broken hero, if that makes any sense, right? Because in any other meta, it seems like he would just be nuts. He should be nuts, it seems like, because he has just insane damage from insane range, and everything in his kit just complements itself, right? Because you can scout out people with your Sentinel and get away with your ultimate, which I'm forgetting the name of right now. But just the fact that you can't 100-0 someone very easily because his auto attacks are too slow, it just leaves him a little bit weaker than the very, very top marksman. Okay, Nakaroth jumps up even farther. I think I had him pretty high in the April tier list, but he's just multifaceted. There's never going to be a game which he isn't extremely valuable, whether it's jumping on someone. The one thing I've always said about Nakaroth is that he is good at 50 to 0ing someone, or 100 to 50ing them. Like, if someone was able to chunk someone down, like maybe Tel gets a couple of shots off, Nakaroth says, "Oh, you're low." He just jumps in and kills them and runs away. Whereas, like, compared to someone like Crickneck likes 100 to 0 someone, whereas Nakaroth likes 150 someone or 50 to 0 someone. But even if he's not unable to, like, he's just kind of flits in and out of battle all the time. It's very hard to catch, and he can kind of deal the damage on his own terms. And even if the opposing team starts grouping up his 5 and preventing him from really getting any shots in, he then turns into the best split pusher in the game. So it's kind of like damned if you do, damned if you do with Nakaroth, because his mobility is very effective right now. Dioma's next. Dioma moves up as well. Dioma, he can literally play every single position game. Like, even I could have written actually 1 DS lane jungle mid and then 4 a side lane, but kind of side lane and DS lane really they overlap anyway, so I wasn't gonna go that far. I did write that he could play support, but that's not a good idea because you're really not making best use of him. But I mean, he does have a very heavy slow and a stun, so there is that. Basically, Dioma, because there's so many squishies, like, it used to be that Yum was a very heavy early game hero, and he fell off late, but now he's good throughout the game because the opposing team needs to have or usually has at least 2 squishy heroes for him to pick on, right? And the fact that you can pinwheel Welling Blade in from like a ridiculous distance and catch marksman off guard allows him to just really just burst someone down. And it's hard to dodge because the Wailing Blade animation is instant, which is a really big deal. That's one of the biggest reasons why. Like if they put like even like a 0.25 second animation on Wailing Blade, he would immediately drop to like tier 2 or 3 or something, like way down. That's just the fact that Wailing Blade animation is instant means he just completely just blows apart squishy heroes, and usually the squishy heroes are mobile too. So mobile heroes are used to seeing a cast animation or seeing them like wind up, and they're able to run away. But Neoma can catch even those people because, just even if you're in the wrong area for a split second, you get caught by him. So Neoma now good all game. Linda's just like this. My explanation here. There's nothing really to say here. She's still really good. Just had to move a couple of people above her. It's not like she dropped. I just moved people up. Quillen still very good. I dropped him a little bit because you can't just waltz into a game and just win easily now. Like before, people were having so much trouble with him with the amount of bursts he had and the fact that he was stealthed, that even if you were bad at him, you'd still be effective. And now if you're bad with him, it's just really damaging because people know how to play against him, right? They know that he's bad in the early game. They know kind of his power spikes kind of by heart, right? Because before, they didn't know when to fight him. Like people be so scared of Quillen that they just run away, and that gave him like so much real estate on the map to go to work and kind of get his farm and get up, and perhaps you catch someone off guard in the wrong situation because they're kind of running away from you, all that kind of stuff. Or maybe the opposite, right? You were like underestimating his damage in certain parts of the game. Basically, people know his progression, and the people who play him like any other assassin, which is to say that they think he scales early, or he has lots of damage early, which he just doesn't, unless you're hitting like every single crit, and even then you're probably not going to kill someone as long as there's someone careful. So yeah, he's perfectly fine, even though you don't see him all the time in professional matches, but that's just because people are very good at playing around him. But in your solo queue games, he's still great. He's still capable of more capable of mega kills than anyone in the game, but just slightly lower. Next, Crickneck I moved up, and this is where I feel vindication, where I take my victory lap like I wrote here, because I kept saying that Crickneck was good, and I kept getting people saying like, why do you have Crickneck so high, he's bad now, or even pros me like, oh, Crickneck's bad now. And it's like, you guys, I'm sorry, he's still good. Anyone who can burst that well, you're probably not playing him very well. And I was half vindicated by the start of the RPL when first one was just dominating with Crickneck, and it's like, oh yeah, you can actually still win with a bursty hero like that. Like when Quillen came out, people were like, "Oh, Crickneck is like old news," but I don't know. He's still very, very good for obvious reason. So I moved him back into tier S. I had him as like a situational in tier 1, but he definitely belongs in tier S because his burst is always going to be useful. Next we have Zephys, who I moved. I thought I moved down actually, but he's in the same place. People are playing him a bit more damaging, which I think is probably the way to go, because you need to be able to just delay people. That's very, very valuable. Obviously, he's durable. He has his passive, which makes him hard to kill. If you're building him Glass Candle, he's not going to be that durable when he gets low. But once you get to the end game or late game, he can be more valuable than like a Crickneck is in those situations, because he has a massive AoE stun with Death from Above. That can be, that's obviously better than like a drone drop where you're just jumping in and, maybe you get a lot of damage, but you're immediately dead. Whereas Zephys, he has a couple moments to chunk someone down, perhaps kill them before he goes down. So I saw Crickneck a little bit higher, just because early game and mid game in Crickneck, the ability to absolutely delete someone he can do a lot better than Zephys, but Zephys is still very, very solid. Murad's been up and down in professional play. And I just had not moved him. I just had not moved him in my tier list because he's always going to be very valuable in solo queue. They've fixed a bug with him, which I didn't even know was a bug. I thought it was just like how his ability worked. I think it's his first ability where if the beginning of the indicator was on something, it wouldn't apply the stun or damage. And apparently that was just a bug the entire time. So now it's much easier to play him, especially for beginners. And if you're playing him, you're probably going to have a better idea of what you're capable of than whoever you're playing against, or the person playing against you can deal with him, right? So yeah, he's he's always just going to be able to flourish just because even like in lower levels, they just don't know how his kit works at all, and you just get in temporal turbulence and just chunk them down. They're like, "What the hell just happened?" And in higher levels, you're the top Mirrored players are able to just dance around with his first and second abilities and really make him work in a way that other players have a hard time with unless they're just better, you know. All right, moving on. Teamy and Bottom are the two best supports right now. They'd be higher if this were a pro list, but it's hard to dominate games on ladder with the support, so they're in the middle of tier S. Teamy, just even though being a bro is an amazing tool in a solo queue game, just because you know that your teammates are always just going to be doing something stupid, or they're targeting one of your teammates, and sometimes you can't get them off them. And just having the ultimate tool as far as keeping them alive and being a bro is nice. But even more so, arguably, is the scavenge passive, because you can be down in kills and still have an even gold situation because of that. You can just kind of have an even stalemate game, but somehow you're ahead like 2,000 gold just because of the scavenge passive. It's absolutely nuts. Balda moves up. This seems like a higher jump than it was. I already had him pretty high in the April list. Baldum, he, like, Wild Charge might be one of the best abilities in the entire game, both for getting people off your backline. Because if you think about it, someone jumps on your marksman, you hit him, or you Wild Charge them, right? Not only did they get knocked up, like, the animation for them to get knocked up and back down is so long, and then you displace them in a completely opposite direction. Like, it's so hard for them to continue jumping on your marksman at that point, and the entire time it's happening, as long as your marksman is paying attention, they're just wailing on like whoever that assassin is, and they probably have to run away or they just die. So it's just nuts. And you can't even just approach like a marksman if they're next to a bottom, whereas like there's some other supports where you can just kind of take advantage of the situation. Obviously it's an amazing pick tool, and you'd be surprised how many marksmen just completely underestimate the length of the Wild Charge. Like, you just go in, they'll just be standing there, and you're like, okay, you're dead now. I guess I'm just gonna use this ability on you, and you're gonna be dead because they have no idea how long it is. All the changes that they made to Prison 2 to make sure, or to make sure it still holds its utility even if you miss. Like, it provides a slow. There's more damage there. There's like slows along the way too. It's just everything that they have along with that helped him quite a bit. But I think the biggest thing is he's super tanky. And his Wild Charge is just absolutely dominant, no matter how it's used. Omen, I don't really have a lot of things to say with Omen, other than he's just... he's not dominant, but he can be played in so many situations that he kind of retains his like mid to bottom of the tier S status. If the opponent plays Richter, you can kind of pick Omen as... a guy who can kind of deal with them, right? They kind of push each other to a stalemate, which that's what Omen is these days. It's like if they pick some crazy hero, you can kind of play them to a stalemate. Although I have been hearing complaints in my Discord about Yuna completely dominating Omen, so that might change if Yuna gets too popular. Next is Roxy, who is just overall solid. She loses to most of the people above her, other than maybe Omen. She beats everyone below her. She's very annoying because you can steal a lot of jungle, and she's able to clear waves or clear monsters pretty quickly, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it unless you rotate someone over, and obviously if you're forcing the other person to rotate someone over, then you're in a good spot. She's also a pretty good team fighter because she does quite a bit of damage if she gets in there, particularly if you go for the quadruple burn with Leviathan, Bareth's Mantle, and her Wildfire. Varus drops down a bit because her early game was weaker. Her late game is nuts, but obviously if you having a hard time getting that late game, that can be problematic. Still, she's not completely hopeless in the early game. Sometimes you kind of have to Xenial it up and concede a lot in the early game, but if you catch them with a couple of your first and seconds, then you can start trading relatively well in the matchup regardless of her nerfs in the early game. And like I mentioned, if you're able to get to the late game, she is just absolutely deadly because she's hard to take down. She is constantly getting resets off in team fights, constantly providing lots of CC, and being a good finisher for people who are low. Next is Sephra, who I dropped on quite a bit. A lot of the reason why Sephira has dropped is because of the situational heroes being played a lot. So, like I mentioned earlier, situational heroes or situational mages are being played so that depending on what your opponents have, depending on what your team comp is, you can kind of match it to that. And that's, like I mentioned, it helped Toulon a lot. It's hurt Sephira quite a bit. Sephira can actually deal with Toulon, so if you're playing against a Toulon, she should be fine. She's actually one of the better, even though she doesn't have the greatest wave clear, she's pretty good at dealing with Toulon as far as, in that dual phase, because she can hit him from outside his range. She can just continuously get those water spears off, and it's very annoying for him. So, yeah, Sephira, very good against Liliana, Raz, and, an equal, if not, better, or has some advantage against Toulon. So, it's just you have to pick her against those like more dynamic mages, and it's harder to pick her when you're going against a hero that can clear the wave quickly, because now all of a sudden you're rotating a lot slower than them and you can fall behind. Okay, let's talk about Liliana and Raz. I got a comment saying that I should drop Liliana and Raz further. I do not believe that at all. Just because you're not seeing Liliana and Raz in professional matches as much doesn't mean they're not good. The reason why you're not seeing them in professional matches is because, like I mentioned, there's a lot of situations where you'd rather have a situational mage and not them. And they're just always going to be solid no matter what the situation is. No matter what the game is, no matter what the compositions are, they're always going to be solid. The only problem is there's going to usually be a hero that's better for that particular game, right? But they're still good, and their average strength is better than the situational mages below them. So I'm not going to put them in amongst the Kali's and Jinnars of the world. As far as their placement with regards to each other, I have Liliana a bit higher because having good poke and AoE damage is a bit more useful right now. Malik, he's just Malik. He's there. He's good mid now too. Annette, kind of, she's right at the bottom of tier S. She's still always somewhat useful in every single game, but not having that big frontline presence. Also not having a great of way to get someone off your backline other than blowing Hurricane Wall. And by the way, yes, that is a pun. So I know it's a bad one. other than that, she can't get someone off their backside. So she's always going to be reasonable, and she can be very good. But that's right why I have her holding up the rear of tier S. She's not. There's not a whole lot of situations she's not like great right now, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, tier 1, I've been going on and on about how I've been organizing this list, and again I wrote here, this is where I test my readers' reading comprehension, because again, Superman is better than a lot of these heroes in a lot of situations, but he can be worse in others. So sticking him here, he is like the quintessential tier 1 hero, because very good but very situational. Max, I bumped him up quite a bit because he has lots of targets right now, and a lot of times, whether it's the assassin who kills someone but barely got out of the team fight with 25% health, he punishes that. You can just jump on the marksman and make their life a living hell while your team, even if you don't kill the marksman, as long as you're keeping them busy for your team. To take out everyone else, you're in a good spot. Obviously, Max is capable of doing that if you build a little more damage. And again, with the situational mages, when I say situational, either they're diving in like Flash, or they're like falling back like Kali, and he can punish both of those. So good meta for Max at the moment. And one other thing is that if you're dealing with like a Florentino or maybe in like a Richter, sometimes there's certain heroes who just can't deal with that, and you just have to cede the lane to them. And if you're going to cede the lane to them, then Max is one of the best to do that, because if you're going to cede the lane to them, you might as well have utility outside of that particular duel. One thing, this is my, as a person who has several hundred games on Max, here is my tip to you. He is probably the only person who you can build Spear of Longinus on, and it's because there's a bug in which if you pop your ultimate, if you pop Liftoff with Spear Longinus, the entire opposing team gets minus 150 armor. I don't know if that's a feature or a bug or both, but use it while it's still a thing. Maybe they maybe some Taiwanese person is listening to this right now, and they're going to tell the devs, and they're going to be like, oh crap, we should fix that. So use it while you can. But other than that, don't use Preload during this. And there's actually someone later who I'll mention that with. Tara, I moved up way high. This isn't. I didn't move her up from 79 or I did from February, but in the April patch, or April list, I mean, she was already up to tier 1, but I had her kind of down here, so I did move her up even from that list. People is extremely good at playing her now. They know how to play as her. One thing I will say, if I catch a professional player, if I catch maybe I cast one of your games in an amateur game. If I ever see someone go back as Tara, unless you're literally like within their base, and that's the only way you can get out of there is if you just you press the recall button and hope and pray. Unless you're in that situation, you never be back as Tara, because she's better when she's low at health. You want to be low at health so you can kill people faster. So if ever I see someone low at health using Tara, or recalling as Tara, I'm going to call them out on it, because you do not ever go back. That's the whole point of playing Tara. You can heal with your first and second ability is 9% of your lost HP. Don't make me mad. But anyway, if you watch some of the professional matches, you might think she'd be even higher, maybe in tier S. The reason why I can't put her in tier S, even though she seems like you are like good all around, is because, like I mentioned earlier, she can't do a whole lot in team fights, right? Because if you jump in full health into a team fight, you're not doing much damage. If you jump in like with little health, then you're gonna die very quickly. And you kind of hope, like the hope is that you get in, do some damage, and you just pop your ult. You're able to get out of there. But there's some heroes. There's lots of heroes in this list where you can fight 1v5. Like Varus can fight 1v5. Richard can fight 1v5, and that's what a lot of DS laners are capable of doing, and she's not quite capable of doing that. So even though she's an amazing split pusher, even though she can provide a lot of gravity and have multiple people come over to try to deal with her, she cannot 1v5. And also because she suffers probably the most out of any hero these days when you buy something like Curse of Death or Tome of the Reaper, because it really hurts. You really feel it when the opposing team picks that. Okay, next is Roark. Roark, I did apply the carrot to him. He is better in solo queue, so you might even say he's like tier S if you want to talk about just solo queue. It's just hard to deal with him, because if you run away from him, he just takes objectives and you start falling behind. And if you do deal with him, he pops determination and just kills you. He does have difficulty with like backline mages and marksmen. But if you're a really good Roark and they're less experienced dealing with him, then you can kind of sneak up with them, right? Use your 2, use your 1, pop determination, and then you're just dead in literally 2 shots. So Roark, yeah, he's hard to deal with in solo queue. Once he gets to professional matches, though, he's much more situational and much more a thing that your team needs to play around, because the other team can certainly play around him in response. Zill. Zill is funny because every time you watch Zane play Zill, you're like, oh, Zill's like the best mage in the game. But it's very hard because, first of all, he's technically difficult to play. And sometimes like RNG screws you over. Like if you accidentally kill someone, but like say you're fighting like 1v3, right? And your tornado accidentally killed someone, but you needed to have that person be alive so you could auto them, so you can wind shift away because you wind shift to get in. Weird things like that. And also the fact that like if you start falling a little bit behind, you're completely screwed. Like if you get ahead, you can completely snowball the game, but if you get behind, it's like the opposite. You can't do anything at all. So he is volatile like that. But again, I put him at the top of the best situational heroes amongst these junglers. So he can certainly be very good in the right situation. Fennec, I totally forgot to put Fennec up here. I need a drink for this. 1 second. And not an alcoholic drink, by the way. It's only for my streams. Fennec. Okay, so I noticed while I was casting the other day that people were talking crap about Fennec. And I could be wrong. I could very well be wrong. It's hard to tell. This is... I couldn't wait any longer to put up the tier list. I couldn't be like, oh, where's Fennec going to land? In the days after the patch came out, the May patch, people were banning Fennec like left and right. Which I thought was a little bit too much. I didn't think it was going to be like the very, very top, right? But I do think he's very good, and I kind of, for now, sticking by my placement for him in tier 1. and I don't think that people are practiced enough on him. He plays completely differently now. He honestly plays like the marksman version of Toulon, because you need to be very aggressive with your rolling lightning. The fact that you can proc the Thief's Mark stacks with rolling lightning, and also the fact that rolling lightning makes you invulnerable. That's your iframe, and you can use it twice in a row, and you can really just damage someone like a ton. I think you need to be playing him like basically the Toulon version of marksman, or the marksman version of Toulon. And I think people they don't have enough games on him, because he's a completely new hero. It's a completely new hero. Just because he has the same abilities doesn't mean they're not completely different. They're completely different use. You don't play around them the same. You don't play around his like Thief's Mark the same. You don't play around his rolling lightning the same. Before, he just literally just took objectives and that was it. And the funny thing is, like, even with the fact that he has a completely new kit, I don't think people even played him very well before the change, right? Because there's nothing to do with him. You couldn't do anything with the old Fennec other than just take objectives really, really quickly and take towers, and have that. And even in professional matches, it was like you only played Fennec when you had. And this is pre-tower change, by the way. Even when you played him in professional matches, it was like you just played him with Crash every single time, because you don't want to fight with Fennec in the old patch, because he's a terrible fighter. You just walked around and just took objectives all day and towers all day. So people weren't even good at playing him earlier because they never actually fought with him. And now he's a completely different kit, which you need to play completely differently. So I think that this is my prediction about where he will end up. This is my thoughts about how good I think he is. Again, I could be wrong, but I think that people who say he is bad either are reacting to bad allies or bad opponents, or maybe they tried themselves and they felt very weak. But I think my thoughts on that are they just not practice with him enough, and go practice. You need a few hundred games on him, because he's basically like Toulon now. Okay, next, the Flash. Oh god, it's got done talking about Fennec, now gotta talk about Flash. People really love Flash. I still think he's situational. I think that he is benefiting from the same thing that I said with Toulon. Although I did have Toulon really high because of that, so maybe I should put Flash high. But I still think he's situational. I think if he's playing against Raz, or Toulon, or Liliana, or even Sephra for that matter, he really struggles. And someone who struggles against all those heroes, I don't think I can really see him being that great. Obviously, he can dive marksman. He can kind of trade with assassins. He can do a really good job against situational mages. And that's where I think he's been able to flourish, right? If he doesn't have that really good mid matchup, then he was going to struggle much more than he would normally, right? Because if you a lot of the backline mages, they don't really have a CC, right? If you get into Kali, how can Kali even do anything against Flash other than like the very, very beginning when she's auto attacking, or someone like an Alistair, like Alistair can use his magic prison later, but in the early game he can't really do anything because Flash is going back and forth. But actually, Alistair's a really bad example. I don't know why I use Alistair. Basically, a lot of the backline mages have not a whole lot of CC to be able to deal with Flash, and that's the way you shut him down, right? Is you CC him before he's able to go back. You punish him for going in trying to Mach Punch you, and yeah, just like Toulon, if you can get in there, they can't punish you, then you're gonna be able to do a really good job. Yes, those are my thoughts. There's also a vigil bug with Cyclone, so be careful about that. Next is Ignace. I did move Ignace a little bit up because against a lot of the backline mages, he has a better time with those heroes, and I think people realize. He particularly has a good time against Sephra, but yeah, if he's in any sort of like battle with someone who's more stationary, then he completely wipes them out because he can continuously get his rain of fire and fire crash in and completely just stun lock them to death. Yeah, those are my thoughts on Ignace. Gotta move on. I really need to speed this up because I'm like having trouble talking anymore, and I'm less than halfway through. Okay, let's go. Kali, she's the Poke Master, same place. She's still good. Jinner, I think people are sleeping on Jinner because he can be amazing as far as having the backline, particularly since usually they have backline mages and backline marksmen that he can blow up. And he doesn't have to deal with Sephira nearly as much. So Jinner, a lot better these days. Honestly, I don't think people... I think this is like my rant about Toulon all over again, kind of, in a way. Because I don't think people realize why heroes are good when they're good. Right? Because I've seen people... I remember when Sephira was popular, and I saw people pick Jinner into Sephira a lot. And I'm like, what are you doing? She's a hard counter. Like, not even a soft counter. Like, there's not many hard counters in this game. Right? There's usually soft counters. But she's a hard counter Jinner. And people kept putting Jinner into her. And then people are like, Jinner's not good these days. It's like, I wonder why. I wonder... You keep playing his hard counter. So now I think, like, the ball has swung the other way. I think people are sleeping on him because he doesn't have to play against Sephira nearly as much. Anyway, short rant over. Ugh. Okay. Kilgoth. Not a whole lot to say here. He and Lubu, the fact that they're able to be strong auto attackers in the sideline, that can be very good. Especially it's like as long as they don't die to, like if they play against like a Zuka or a Scud and they don't die to the burst, then they're gonna completely dominate their lane. And a lot of times you can kind of pick them to perhaps deal with someone like a Varus, because of the CC mini that they can get sometimes, and really allow them to dominate the matchup. Sometimes they can kind of deal with Roxy as well. Just looking at the other heroes in tier S, sometimes they can be a good counter to that as long as you're able to take full advantage of their split pushing capabilities. And this is what I was talking about with Spiritual Giants before. Like, it's such a terrible item, but for some reason people think it's good in Lubu. The thought with Lubu is that he is an auto attacker who is somewhat tanky, and like you want to be in fights for a long time, and yeah, like eventually the Spiritual Giants stacks will help because like the qualifications for being able to use Spiritual Giants are very narrow and strict, where you have to not only be someone who benefits from using Pierce, but also someone who can stay alive long enough to use it, as well as like you have abilities to use after the stacks are there. And like Lubu is one of the few people who fits all those, but it's still just a terrible item, so just build something else. So like just because he's the best candidate to use it, other than like the bug on max, doesn't mean you should build it. Just build something else, please. Anyway, move Xeno down because no matter how quick your reflexes are, a fight between the marksman and assassin is over like so fast that he can't even help them. And even if he does, sometimes the burst is too much anyway. And it's just a nightmare dealing with like Caphany and Tel'Annas and Hayate and all those people who just kite him all day. So yeah, it's just very annoying once he gets into a fight. And if the only thing you're doing in the fight is using Angelic Splendor to save them, then you're not really making full use of Xenial. So yeah. Marja, I honestly had a tough time placing. Like, she could very well be in tier 2 these days. It's just she seems reasonable still, like because she can deal with a lot of DS laners that were previously hard to deal with. But you just never see her, and perhaps you don't see her for a good reason. Like, her value in team fights is not the greatest. Like, she can do a lot of damage. Like, you can still build her almost full like glass cannon from the side lane. Just because you get in trouble, you just run away with Ghost Walk. But it's just hard to have impacts on fights, especially 5v5 team fights, and you can't split push because she doesn't kill towers. So yeah, her old role of neutralizing everyone in the DS lane and perhaps winning some other fights is not as apparent anymore. Okay, next, Crushed is... I dropped him. I think I still have him around this area in April, so I haven't dropped him from the last video tier list. Basically the same thing I said last time. People are better at playing around this ult, kind of forcing it out at inopportune times. And if he doesn't have his ult, then he's not as effective as other heroes. But that all said, it can still completely turn a fight, so he's not going to drop too far. Lumber. Lumber is happy because every single tier list I always said Lumber is a poor man's Alice, but finally he's ahead of Alice in a tier list, and it's because he's better at getting people off of his backline. So someone dies his backline, use Rampage, and it's like the best day of Lumber's life because it's like the dream for Lumber. It's like better than a mega kill for Lumber. The dream for Lumber is using Rampage and hitting an enemy and an ally, because like in the olden days when you played Lumber, and especially when you're trying to use him in like an aggressive capacity, right? You either knock someone up with Rampage or you shielded and movement speed boosted your ally, and you never got both off. But nowadays you can get both off, and it feels great. Anyway, moving on. Thane. Thane is like the bait master because his butt is so big. Every time, okay, when he's low, he gets damage resistance, and he gets a massive amount of healing in 4 seconds. So people will continuously try to finish him off because he's extremely low, and they don't realize that the amount of damage they're doing is way less. Not to mention he's healing. So like Thane at when Thane is at like 31% health right before his pass is about to go off, he is more tanky than like a marksman and a half with full health. So if you see his passive going off, just like don't even touch him anymore. It's like not even worth it unless he's literally by himself. And also his CC is really nice, especially for both setting up kills and for saving your backline. Alice is next. Alice is always going to be valuable, right? Because Hissy Fit is just a joke, especially with Frosty Revenge. Friendship can be very nice as well. So she's always going to be she's the quintessential tier 1. Like I can't ever see her leaving tier 1. Whether she's never going to be like tier S because you can't win a game by yourself with Alice. You need help from your allies. And she's never going to be tier 2 because her kit is just too good as a supporting hero. So I don't know. She's just always going to be there. Next is Violet, who took a pretty big tumble. No pun intended, because Tactical Fire she tumbles. Anyway, this has nothing to do with her changes to her kits in the last patch. This has everything to do with just the fact that she needs to be able to 100 to 0 someone who chases her, even if she chunks Assassin down to 20% health. Doesn't matter if she just dies afterward. So yeah, she falls. Sorry. Still very powerful to be able to poke from very far with Tactical Fire, so doesn't fall like all the way down. Wisp is like a worse version of Caphane. It just feels bad. She's still capable of doing a ton of damage. But like everything that think about it. Wisp has Shock and Awe to kind of clear a wave and deal lots of damage. Yes, it's farther range than Fusillade, but basically they're very similar abilities. Wisp has the loose cannon, whereas Caphane has like her pulse cannon. Or pulse gun, whatever it's called, so that they both have like the AoE on their ones. And then Caphane has like, Caphane's 2 is kind of part of like Wisp's 1, but you don't need to put yourself in danger in order to get extra damage as Caphane. So anyway, I keep comparing Wisp to arguably the best hero of the game. Maybe I shouldn't. She's still very viable. She can still do lots of damage, but her biggest weakness is the fact that she needs to dash in order to use more damage with her 1. Yes, the cooldown was reduced like 6 patches ago, and her Barrier Bomb's better. Like everything's better. Like if she didn't get those buffs, she'd be in like tier 2 or 3 right now. But with those buffs, she's in a decent spot in tier 1. If you need like massive damage and someone who can really scale, isn't terrible in the early game either, then Wisp your pick. The biggest problem with Wisp is that there's like 5 marksmen who are better than her right now. Anyway, Nexus Joker. People really like Joker. I think when people look at Joker, they look at his, they kind of get glossy-eyed, and they get kind of like beer goggles in a way. I don't know, maybe that's a bad analogy. They look at his good parts, not his bad parts. Like he gets absolutely deleted if he's in any trouble at all. It's hard for him to get to like the back side of someone and get a kill because you just trade 1 for 1. You're basically just turning to assassin at that point. And if you're a marksman, you are the carry as a marksman. You want to be able to take out multiple heroes by yourself if you're let alone. Whereas Joker cannot do that, right? And yes, and like the thing is, sometimes it's hard to aim your cannon launcher even if you're able to get to the back line. So I don't know. It's just problematic. And while you're getting farmed up, you're just gonna lose to most other marksmen because you basically kind of have to stand around. Not use your auto, use your rocket to clear the mini wave, and in the meantime, if you ever get caught, you just take a ton of shots to the face from the other marksman. and they have more damage than you until you can get a ton of items and start bursting them from 100 to 0. He can be reasonable against certain assassins, because when they jump him, you can just pop pick card any card, you're invulnerable, and then you just kill them. So he can be very frustrating for some certain assassins to deal with. The only problem with that is that you just pick Zill, and like if you pick Joker first, then they can just pick Zill and you're fucked. So you have to be picking him at the right time in the draft. Morin can do ridiculous damage at the end of the game, and he's very, very durable as well. You can get like 400 armor and 400 magic defense, which is nuts from your passive. The problem is he takes a long time to get there, and part of the reason for that is because his AD scaling scales. So the more like the more levels you gain, the more that the AD scales. So it's like most like heroes in general, when you use an attack or when you use an ability, right? The damage that you do will grow throughout the game because the items that you buy and the fact that your AD goes up by itself. Morin, that scaling number actually changes throughout the game. So he's particularly weak in the early game, but as the game goes on, he just gets stronger and stronger and stronger. The problem is, a lot of times you've already lost the game by the time the game gets to that point. Okay, we're getting there. Wonder Woman. She's just solid all around. She has like a couple of strengths here, where braces the submissions, nice team fight thingy. She has decent sustain in lane. Her CC is okay. Her, depending on the situation, like Lasso of Truth can be really, really powerful. But nothing's like overpowered. So if you really need to have like that beefy sideliner or beefy jungler, and just to be able to kind of navigate the game that way, then you can pick her. The problem is, like, if you pick her in the jungle, then you're kind of indirectly picking a marksman jungler in a way, because by the time it gets to like the mid game, you're basically ceding jungle to your ADC to make sure they get farmed up. So it's just a tough way to pick her. So she's very situational, but she's solid enough that she is able to round out the last pick in tier 1. Okay, moving on tier 2. Tier 2, same thing as tier 1, just even more specialized. Worse in more situations, but again, the fact that they're even more specialized means that sometimes they're even better than the ones in tier S. So yeah, these guys can jump quite a bit depending on the situation. Starting with Wukong. Wukong, it's just kind of funny because as much as like Richter is the quintessential, or like the poster boy for tier S, and Superman's the poster boy for tier 1, Wukong is definitely the poster boy for tier 2, because he can be so good, but it can also be so bad. And the thing that people need to realize when you play Wukong, he's very much like Quillen. He doesn't start out very well, especially because like you don't know when you're gonna get a crit, and you can't like jump on someone and hope you get a crit. And if you don't get a crit, then you don't kill him, because that will just doom you for the rest of the game. So you have to do a lot of just farming before you can do anything, unless you know that you're gonna get a kill even without hitting a crit, and that can be hard for your team. Who is waiting for you, or who expects you to kind of join team fights and help them out and get ganks, because you can't always do that with Wukong. But yeah, he can be ridiculous at the end of the game because of the double stealth, because of just insane damage that you get from crits. Moving on, Lumia. Lumia, just the fact that she has like insane CC, like every single one of her abilities is CC, which is super nice. And like the Cataclysm can be completely game changing, and she's so weirdly situational, because there are certain heroes you can pair her with, like a Baldom. Like if you have amazing like map vision, or what's the word? Basically, if you're very cognizant of what's going on the map, like you pick like a Baldom and you get one wild charge and you immediately pop Cataclysm, and that person's like completely dead at that point. Just the weird things like that where you can totally pair with other heroes in the game who provide like significant CC and just completely dominate them. But you have to be really good at her to do that in particular. I did have her difficulty as medium, just because people are overestimating how hard it is to combo her abilities together. Literally, if you just press buttons at random, you will do what she's intended to do, which is get as many empowered divine lights off as possible. So yeah, she can be very nice as far as like someone who can be very annoying in the early game. I think a lot of people underestimate her when they go off against her and duel her in the early game, because those Divine Lights can be very, very powerful, and allow her to win those duels, and then she can get out of control and just really provide lots of viable, value with Cataclysm. One of the big things, though, is that if you have an assassin with more than one dash, they just get around banish, which means she's like dead a lot. So you got to be careful about who you play against. She's particularly not great against Necroth. Alistair is like if we need to lock someone down. It's funny how I use Alistair as like as an example to not counter Flash when I was like going through the example, like, wait a second, this is a terrible example. It's actually a very good idea to pick Alistair into Flash, because he dives in, you immediately pop your Magic Prison, and you lock him under a tower, and he's dead. So things like that. If you need to have extra CC from the mid lane, then he's your guy. Otherwise, he's a bit slow, and his abilities can be hard to land, especially if you need to just lock them down with Magic Prison. It's very hard to get Matrix of Woe, Magic Barrier, and Magic Prison in one combo, particularly on a mobile hero. So sometimes you have to settle for just the Magic Prison. That means you're having to have a lot of coordination with teammates. And that can be difficult, so he's situational. Moving on, Natalia I dropped because she relies on setup supports like me and Grak, and she's pretty immobile. I mean, literally her ult, she has to stand still. Yes, it's very nice because you cleanse like CC, you get a little bit of shield, but that can leave you super vulnerable. And all of her abilities, she stands still for a moment. So if you miss, it provides an opportunity for the team to jump on you. So you need to be hitting your shots. And in particular in team fights, if you miss like one Arcane Spirits, then you don't get the CDR, you don't get the damage, and your team might be dead. So you really have to land her shots. So it makes her a little bit more difficult to play, especially against the mobileness of the game right now. Next is Yorn. Yorn's basically the same thing as Natalia, but the Marksman form. He does the most damage in the game from the Marksman role, but he has to stand still to do it. And there are other heroes who can do like 90% of his damage, but aren't nearly as mobile. But if you really need the most damage in the freaking game, then go for him. He's fine. He also has good range, so there's that. You can take down towers pretty easy. Yevoneth bumped him down pretty far. Already bumped him down in the April list, but this is like another bump down from there too as well. Yevoneth, in the right meta, he's amazing. In this meta, he's terrible, because a lot of times he's dealing with backline mages or marksmen who he just can't reach them. he needs a way to proc his Redwood Rampage in order to get to them, and sometimes there's just not heroes available to do that too. And then even like the assassins, even though usually they're melee, they have enough burst damage to get through Nature's Realm. So Yevoneth has a tough time these days, and you have to have him in the right situation. Aram, same thing. I think people pick Aram way too much. Like the idea behind Aram is like you lock down like a Richter or Quillen or some other diving. I mean, there's so many dive assassins that it's like, oh yeah, pick Aram and lock them down. It never works. It never works because the other aspect of this meta. The other aspect of this meta is that there are backline mages or marksmen, and she absolutely gets demolished by them, and she can't do anything, particularly in lane. And like if you put her in the DS lane, then she's not going to be there to trap the assassin, or not, at least not nearly as often as you'd like. And if you play her support, she's not going to help when you try to help in the abyssal lane. And if the other support's helping in the abyssal lane, then you all of a sudden are falling behind in that lane, and just like things go to hell really, really quick, because she just has such a tough time dealing with marksman. And the other thing is like even against like a diving assassin, people think about they miss the forest for the tree sometimes. They say, well, Aram can snare them, but you forget like, wait, at level 4. If the assassin's going to be coming around, you're probably still level 2 or 3. They just kill you right then and there because they have enough burst to ignore your beast basically. And then also you're super far behind, and then your team, like, you're just walking around like behind towers the entire rest of the game because you picked a hero that can't deal with assassins at all, especially in the early game. So yeah, the last thing I'm gonna say, which is why like Aram isn't great, is like if you have 2 people who dive you, like Richter and Quillen, then you can only snare one. And if you're not under a tower, then the other one is just kind of wreaking havoc on your backline. So they're not even going to kill the person you snared because you're occupied anyway. So it's like it can be very like picking Aurum can just be a complete waste. And I've seen her in professional matches completely fall flat. And I guarantee you, unless the other team just falls into your uncage or something, or they're really just bad at kiting you, then you're gonna have a hard time with Aurum in your games as well. Mina's interesting because there's no real reason why she's like bad in the current meta, other than that she can't really get someone off her backline as easily as other heroes. The other thing is she's not as tanky as some of the heroes that need to get up and close and personal. She's still good at setting up kills, so in the right situation she'd be good. But that still leaves her in tier 2. If you have a good way to set up a kill. Like for instance, the funny thing is, like, if you pick, Mina and Natalia, both tier 2 heroes, and surround them with the right composition, you can definitely snowball a game by just getting a lot of picks from the fact that they really synergize together. Obviously, if you don't get those picks, then you're having a hard time because of the fact that the current meta, they kind of crap all over them other parts of the game. But I guess what I'm trying to say is Mina can be really good. It's just that there's less situations for her to be good right now, which is why she's tier 2. Moving on, Pyrrha. Pyrrha, she's good at snowballing games by healing early, and kind of giving you the early advantage for the objectives, like the Abyssal Dragon, and perhaps the opponent gets greedy, doesn't go back. You're healthy, they're not, and you get picks in lane, things like that. But she's problematic because you can't save someone who dives your backline. Like, the healing comes in like little tiny bursts, but not huge bursts. You can't. There's a little bit of cast time on her Nature's Rally, and even after you use it, doesn't stun them for like another second afterwards. So there's no way for you to really save your backline if an assassin just jumps on them, and that's problematic. So Grak is kind of the same. His World Devourer, it's too slow to save your backline from an assassin. They could just kill them and get out of there before he even gets it off. If you get picks though with your Devil's Chain, then anything can happen with Grak. Grak is just so volatile. You could completely dominate a game, or you completely be useless with a Grak, depending on the situation. But these days, it's hard to play him because in lane, marksman can just hide behind the minions and not get hit. And if you're trying to save your backline, it can be very, very hard with his kit. Ormar, I moved down in the video list, moved him back up for this list. After his buffs, the cast times are better. They feel good, but they're still there. And like if you pop your ult, it's like you're keeping yourself alive, but you're basically turning into Toro then. So I don't know if that's useful. They just ignore you. You can sort of play in the DS lane if you're dealing with a bursty hero, but if you're playing as an auto attacker, then you're just gonna get completely demolished. So he's very situational in that case as well. Batman, he can snowball a game, but once it starts getting late, it's problematic because if you're a lot of assassins are decent at split pushing. He is not. He's terrible at that because he has no dash or whatsoever to speak of. If you try to stealth, they can oftentimes just kill you before you even get to your stealth form. So that's hard. Also, once you get into a fight, you can't get out. You have to just stay there. And yes, you can heal a lot with your battering, but it gets hard. So yes, you can snowball a game, but you start falling off a little bit later. So you need to snowball a game essentially. Arrow, I don't have the greatest idea or opinion of him. This is one where I kind of leave it to you guys. Leave your comments in the comment section down below, if I can English properly. But he's like a hard hero to play. I don't know what his ceiling is if you get really good at him. There are certainly players who have played him quite a bit and have gotten decent with him. It's just hard to I saw a game with Circle, for instance, where he goes and cuts away and does all that kind of jazz. But it's hard to see right now what the best version of Valor is right now, and what that entails. What you're doing on the map. I can't even. It's hard to even tell what he does great. He does a lot of things reasonable. And a lot of it has to do with using your autos to set up your second ability. And I don't know. The point is, he seems decent. The opinions on him were all over the place in the beginning, and I still don't have a great feel for him. So yeah, let me know what you think. This seems like a good place to stick him though. Irie. So Irie, everyone thinks Irie's like the worst hero in the game. It's very strange. And in the Reddit post or in the Reddit subreddit, the thread thingy, can't English. I got like 2 or 3 different comments saying like, I think it's a great list, but I disagree with Irie. I still think she's like the worst hero. And they laid out their case like, well, she can't do what like Zuka and Scud do. Like she can't get the backline, like not having the shorter stun on you is not great. And my thinking is that like a lot of these comments are coming from like Irie mains, and I feel like they're just not because they don't have the guidance from professionals. They're not playing her correctly, and that's my thinking on it. And what I mean by that is that every single other hero, whether it's Richter or whomever, they made the switch to full glass cannon, right? And obviously Zuka and Scott have been building full glass cannon for quite a while now. But if you build, go into training right now. I tested this just to make sure. Go into training, pick Irie, go against Tel'Annas. If you go full glass cannon, even like 3 or 4 items in the build, you like 2-shot her. It's just like nothing. And the fact that she can double dash in, kill her, and get out, I feel like she's just as valuable as someone like Zuka. And particularly if she has her ult up. And you might say like, well, if she needs her ult up, then she's not as good. But if you think about it, if Zuka and Scud are diving a Tel'Annas without their ult, they're gonna die. So I feel like it's the same exact situation and she's more mobile than them. She can cut the waves better than them. Yes, she has a hard time dealing with the opponent in the Darkslayer lane, but that's true of a lot of people, especially once you get down to tier 2. I suppose Zuka and Scud have a maybe slightly easier time, but they don't have they don't even have the mobility of Irie because her shadow distance is a little bit longer than those guys. So yeah, I don't know. I think she's fine. And I think that people should be building her glass cannon so that they can kill people and not have to worry about whether she's like a tweener. So on the other hand, there's Zuka, who people like love. They think he's a counter to Florentino. And I don't think that's true. I think that like Zuka mains are just really good Zuka, and perhaps playing as Florentinos who aren't as experienced with them. But I don't know. I don't like Zuka. He's kind of weird because he is like in between being able to be good in the early game and being able to be good in late game. Like it's hard to tell like where his kind of power spike is. But yeah, it's tough. Also, you need to have his like cheap passive to be like that viable, and a lot of times it just takes like one bit of CC to get him off, and then he's basically dead because he's building like full glass cannon, right? And there's a little bit of animation time to his abilities, right? Because you gotta roll, you gotta hit, you gotta roll, you gotta hit, and if yes, you can just jump on like a marksman and take them out, but if there's anyone else there, it's problematic. Scud is similar to Zuka, but he has more bursts but less mobility. So if Scud gets in the right situation, he can just jump on an entire team and just burst them all down. The only problem is if they spot you like walking up, then you're just dead. Like if you can't immediately get your Wild Beast Fury off, then they're gonna kill you. And even if you do, you're gonna die quickly anyway. You just hope that you get 2 people down before you do. So yeah, he can struggle in certain situations. But if you need burst damage, he can be pretty good. Amelie. By the way, these like all these heroes can be very effective. And I keep talking like crap about them and talking about their weaknesses, but again, they're in tier 2 for a reason. I know we're getting to like the 65th hero, but the reason why I'm talking crap about them is to compare them to people in like tier 1 tier S. But there's a lot of depth in this game, and they're still gonna be really good even down here. Which is basically what I thought of when I got to Amelie, because Amelie's still very solid. She's just a bit of a tweener, right? And if you know basketball, you know what I'm talking about, where you're kind of in between positions. Even if you go full damage, it's hard for her to one-shot people, right? And if you go full like tank, then she's not going to do a whole lot. And the biggest thing is that her ult is extremely short, right? So if this were more of like a kind of bruiser meta, then she could be a lot higher because her kickblade can heal her for. They buff her kickblade and she could be able to use that for a long time and stay alive for quite a while. But it just doesn't really do much damage. Combo kind of does some damage, but not if you're hitting multiple heroes. Like, yeah, you can knock out multiple people, but if you're not damaging them, they don't really care. Her dual passive like very rarely goes off. I think I saw something like with like a crit build the other day, but and that would actually kind of work because she does get the extra damage from crit on her dual passive. But it's yeah, there needs to be more experimentation. Not a whole lot of people are playing it right now, but yeah, she's kind of in a weird spot. Arduin, Arduin is weird because like maybe not even 6 months ago, like a year ago, he was like surprisingly good in certain situations, and he's still in a situation where like if you play against him in DS lane and you don't know his kit, then you're gonna die to him because he's just gonna kill you. You need to play around all of his cooldowns and all that kind of jazz, or else you're gonna be in trouble. The problem is he's actually like really bad when you get team fights. Like you would think he's tanky, he can use bloodlust, he can get back up, but like no, he evaporates. And that's just problematic. And he's just like a worse version of Malik essentially, because you kind of pop your 2, get some true damage in, but he can't, once he gets to the bloodlust situation, he needs to be constantly attacking and doing stuff, and then you can just either run away and re-engage with him, and even if you just let him get his attacks off, he's not going to get them off that quickly, and he just kind of dies. So he's just kind of a really bad version of Malik, and you know, in Ever Since the World doesn't have the same engage, doesn't have the same sustain, doesn't have the same damage. So yeah, sad times. He is good in lane though. He is good in the beginning of the game. So if you're not careful. Speaking of good in lane and good in the beginning of the game, Astrid, you can really kill people. You can throw people off guard with the fact that she's constantly putting her shield back up. The problem is you can just pick Kogoth or Lubu and just kind of kill her. Like, other than her ultimate, Dire Blow, which like stuns people and does like execute damage, the rest of her kit is basically revolving around auto-attacking, and if you want an auto-attack hero, pick Omen, Kilgrath, or Lubu. So that's the sad part about her. Slims. So I've always hated Slims. Seems like people are like kind of finally agreeing with me. He just doesn't have very good range. Like, he takes a long time. His 2 main weaknesses are he takes a long time to build to good damage, and then once he does build to good damage, he doesn't have good range, right? And whereas someone like Morin's kind of like a similar situation as far as like it takes a while to get up and he doesn't have the same range. But Morin, his first ability like automatically just his first ability is a dash in and of itself, so he's constantly dashing around, being annoying, right? Kind of like a poor man's Lindis. Whereas Slims, he's just kind of slow. Now, yeah, he gets some movement speed with his ult, but you have to pop your ult for that, which is problematic. His second ability is a bit clunky. Like, after you land, he kind of stands there for a while. Whereas Morin's 2 just immediately pushes them back, and it's a lot better for that. And also, again, the ult situation, right? Like, Morin's flitting back and forth because he's using his 1, he's doing tons of damage, whereas Slims has to pop his ult in order to do that damage in the first place. And then, you know, meanwhile, Morin just has a completely separate ult. And the fact that I'm comparing him to Morin, who's only like 1 tier ahead of him, and he's losing in every single manner, that's not great. Like, basically, the only thing that Slims have above Morin is his spear. And spear is like not great these days at super short range. That was a change from like 4 patches ago. And so yeah, you need to hit like a super lucky long range spear in the early game in order to be effective with Slims, and that's not a good situation to be in. Valheim. He has less damage than all the other marksmen, so unless you win in 10 minutes, don't play him in the Abyssal. If you play him in the DS lane, you better be countering someone, or else you're not gonna be able to doing a whole lot in the game. You're not gonna have the same utility as someone else who would normally be in the DS lane for the rest of the team fights. And for a lot of heroes, once they get to certain power spikes, he's not gonna be able to counter them anymore. Anyway, moving on. You can I'm like slurring my words right now. Oh hey boy. Okay, tier 3. Whew. Let me just. Okay. Ugh. Okay. So there's a couple types of heroes in tier 3. One of them is like hyper situational, like Ignace. The other is just a really low ceiling, like an Arthur here. So yeah, let's go through them. Ignace. like I mentioned here, he's basically like Wukong equivalent because he takes really long to get going. Probably even longer than those two actually. But once he does, there's no immediate payoff, right? He's not like immediately just like tearing apart heroes. He needs to have his stacks as well. And on top of that, he can't go over walls. He's pretty immobile, everything considered. So he's just a hard time getting people and getting those kills. But once he does get to like a crazy late game power spike where he has a ton of stacks, he has a nice hybrid build going, it's super late game, then all of a sudden he's like unstoppable. Like he can just kill anyone, and there's nothing really you can do about it. But he needs to get there in the first place, and most games he doesn't get there. Not only that, but your team never knows how to play around Xanus because they always have the same rhythm. Like, okay, we do this, we do that. Okay, it's it's a minute 30. Here comes the jungler. He's gonna gank, and we're good. But Xanus doesn't always get the kills in that situation because he takes too long to farm up, and then you start falling behind, and your team yells at you, and you feel bad, and everything about life is terrible. Anyway, moving on. Butterfly. Butterfly, very simple. These days you want mobile bursty assassins. She is not mobile at all. She has a little bit of a movement speed thing on her 1, but that's it. And she has a jump on her 3. But as far as like getting in and out, she's not good at. And if you're just looking to kill someone right away, like a Batman or a Crickneck, then she's not good at that either because she doesn't have as much burst as them. Gilder is like the DS version of Xanus. Just takes way too long to farm up. Like, yeah, you can say, okay, he doesn't need to interact with the DS laner. But if you're hiding behind the tower, like, you'd rather just be max. And I know there's, like, clips out there in both casual and professional matches where he just, like, completely junks someone with one of his extravagance. But that it usually takes way too long to do that. And if you're in a casual game and if you're doing that, then you're probably playing against people who are not very good. Sorry to say. Arthur's just not great at anything in particular. Like, he doesn't have crazy burst. He doesn't have like great CC. Like, even once he gets to level 4, you have to expend your ult to do that. He's like not like a great auto attacker. If you're auto attacking, even if you have your Holy Guard, your 2 up, you're still gonna lose to auto attackers. Like, even if they can just fight in your magic damage and still kill you if they're like an Omen or a Kilgroth or Lubu. So, or even like an Astrid for that matter. So, yeah, he's just not good at one particular thing. And he's not great at one particular thing. He's decent at everything. But whatever strength your opponent has is probably going to outdo you. But that said, he's still reasonable. You can still win games with him, and I suggest him to newer players just to learn about when to engage, when to checking the map out, all that kind of stuff. Chognar. I hate Chognar. Chognar, literally, I have him in tier 4, except for the fact that you can kind of play him in the DS lane, and be like a split pusher who is very hard to kill. Like, if someone rotates over to kill you, just pop your ult and you're out of there. He doesn't do anything. Like, I've been complaining about him in professional games all the time, but he can scout, yeah, sure, but that doesn't do anything. And if you want to just have someone who scouts, just pick Toro. He doesn't do any damage. He does negligible damage. I guess if you do play him, because he can deal damage from far away with his energy surge, you could put Frosty's Revenge and Tomb of the Reaper on him, stuff like that, to make sure you get value out of him. That's the only time I would ever even think about playing him. But if you're just picking him and playing him with just a standard, just full defense build, you're doing nothing because you're doing no CC, you're doing no damage, and if you wanted to just scout, then you could pick, multitude of other heroes. Even against Darcy, I'd rather have someone else because, like, who cares if in one situation against one particular hero you can affect the game. It's like, first of all, you want to have heroes who are multifaceted, who can be both reactive and proactive. That's why heroes like Baldum and Teamy are good, because they can do both, right? They can be very aggressive and they can be very protective of their teammates. If you're picking Chognar just for Darcy, you're picking him literally to deal with one hero's ultimate. And not only are you not always going to be there to help your teammates, but Darcy can dominate the fights and the situation even without using his ult. Meanwhile, you can do nothing outside of your ult. Just Chognar. Just don't Chognar, please. And if you do pick him, please put some damage on him. Actually, now that we're here, since we're going on that tangent, if you pick Jognar, go Frosty's Revenge, Frostcape. Just make him, just make him as close to like support Sephira as possible, where you're just doing as much slowing to them, because otherwise you're not going to help your team at all. Anyway, moving on. Crixie is like the Arthur of mages. She has nice CC in her 2, which allows you plenty of time to get your ult off, get some nice damage off. It's just not crazy damage, and she has some movement speed when she uses her abilities, but that's like not great. She doesn't have a dash or anything. So yeah, she doesn't have great burst, she doesn't have great CC, she doesn't have great mobility, but she has okay of all 3. And she's a good hero to like wean yourself off of Vera. Like if you're used to playing Vera because that was your first hero, it's good to like pick Crixie because she does have to actually aim to her abilities. And she has to aim her CC, so it's a good way to like kind of graduate from Vera onto the next hero. So I recommend her for new heroes. L'Oreal, I should have probably dropped her earlier. I didn't realize like she was she was the best mage in the Arena of Valor for like several months. So if someone's ever the best in the game, it's very hard to like think of them as being all the way down to tier 3. But yeah, that's where she is. She just dies before she can do anything, right? She wants to get a few cycles off of the wheel and blink after she uses smite, and she just can't. She can't get those off because she just gets completely demolished. And the other thing is like in the olden days, she did better when she fought 2 heroes, because that allowed her to get her passive off and just get her explosions going and get her damage in and get her healing as well. But now she's fighting as 2 heroes, like they either burst her down immediately, or one of them like locks her down so that she can't get her blink off, and then she just dies. So like the situation when she's supposed to thrive in, she completely just gets killed right now. Vera, I moved her up a tiny bit just because, like, theoretically, if your team's working to help her out, she can get to a situation where she can 100 to 0 an assassin. The problem is that it takes her a while to get to that spot, and even if she does get to that spot, she needs to have the assassin like duel her 1v1, which is problematic, right? Because not all assassins are that stupid. But you can do decently well in the game if you are playing against a brain dead assassin who's not used to jumping on not used to jumping on a Vera, because it's kind of like the late game version of Maganga, right? Like Maganga, I was gonna get to him later, but we're gonna do him now. Maganga, the only reason that Maganga wins games is because people know he's bad, and so therefore they underestimate him, right? So they try to fight him at the beginning of the game. It's like, oh, Magonga's a terrible hero, and they fight him at the only time of the game in which he's good, which is the early game, and then he just poisons them and kills them. If like all you have to do against Maganga is not fight him for 2 minutes, and then you win the rest of the game because he's terrible, because he's slow and he doesn't have immediate burst. He needs to have like stacks on before he uses his 3. So Vera's like the exact opposite of that, right? So Vera, she's not great in the early game. In fact, she's not even good in the mid game either. But if assassins are used to jumping like, I don't know, like if they're used to jumping like a Raz or something, and they they try to dodge a CC or something, or they're good at like dodging the CC and then working around them. Like if they go against a Vera, they're like, okay, she's gonna use her stun against me, but I can kill her afterward. Like if she has enough farm up, she can just 100 to 0 them, and not many other mages can do that. So yeah, very niche spot, but she can at least do that. So moved her up from tier 4. Toro, I wrote here that he's tankiest hero in the game, and he can peel first backline. So normally you'd think that'd be great. He's tier 2. He's like Arthur, right? Not Arthur. I mean, he's like Thane. But like all of his abilities are so clunky. It's very annoying. And his second ability is just like, I don't know what the point is, other than just kind of like his second ability is literally just stand there and be tanky. It does very little damage. I suppose if you have Mantle of Raw, you can kind of get there and deal damage. The one nice thing about Toro is that unless your opponent's doing a really good job of targeting, then you can just kind of get in there and they can't not hit you because you're the first thing that's in their face. So up until Diamond, even like Diamond games, you can probably make good use of Toro just by being in their face and forcing them to attack you. So yeah, he's not terrible. I mean, he's the bottom of his list, but he's useful still. Just very annoying to get off his abilities. Diao-chan, again, like I mentioned in the very beginning of this video, fixed the character, because if you're playing her against a coordinated team, or not even against a coordinating team. If you're playing against someone who knows what her abilities are, then they can just dodge them and not have to deal with them. And she has a lot harder time. And it seems like a lot of playing Diaton is just throwing out Diamond Dust and praying it lands. And the other thing is that like you can't even use her ult unless you land a 2. I mean you can, but it's just RNG fest, and you're not going to kill someone unless you're completely desperate and you can't use her 1, which is not usually the case. So yeah, no other hero like that. There's no other hero like that in the game where you need to have like a condition to use your ultimate. Like usually your ultimate is what makes you go in the first place and makes you determine team fights in the first place. So it's just very, very not good. And the other thing I wrote here is like if you play against Xiaochan, just get Gildegreaves. Like don't be stubborn and risk it. She's gonna hit you with 1 Diamond Dust. Like it's gonna happen just from like pure random chance. And that can't be like an immediate death for you. So just get Gildegreaves, and you'll have the better hero. Don't worry about it. Preda. I'm gonna have someone contribute to the like professional version. Like I had a couple professional people weigh in on the last tier list, at least in February. And one of the guys was saying like, why do you hate Preda? And I don't understand like why people would even like Preda. Like my description speaks for itself. Like people's ults usually do stuff. His ult makes him so that he's like kind of can auto attack like a marksman. I suppose it resets your 1 and 2, but it's like it's not great. And your 1 still has to go off, and if you let it go off early, then it does less damage. So it's very, very hard for you to be effective in team fights. Yes, if you're extremely experienced with him, then maybe you can make something happen. But if you're, it's just very fraught playing Preda because, again, you need to land your 1 and 2s exactly, and then have them land afterward in order for you to get kills. Meanwhile, in order to charge your Plague Spectre, you have to sit there for 3 seconds, whereas other heroes like Liliana can just pop their Shining Light, which basically does nearly the same amount of damage, but hers is instantaneous, and yours has to be sitting there for a long time. And not only that, but it tells your opponent where you're going to be shooting it, unlike, Joker's Rocket, for instance. So, yeah, I don't know why... the only thing I can think of why people think he's decent is because, like, a year and a half ago... maybe a year ago, but yeah, actually no, it was a year and a half ago. When the top mages were like L'Oreal, Toulon, and like Raz, and I think Liliana hadn't come out yet. At that time, and then like professional matches, if they were banned out, if like the top mages were banned out, or something happened where you couldn't get them, Preda was the backup to that, right? Because at the very least you could sit back and clear the waves, and you can be kind of dynamic because you're have a little bit of mobility because you're just faster than everyone else, like you're just your movement speed, and you can auto attack and all that kind of stuff. And I just think people are remembering that, and they're like, oh, I remember we used to fall back on Preda. It's like, no, that was a different time. Things are different now. He's bad. I'm sorry. He's just not good. If you want someone to fight from the back line or fight from the back, you'd rather pick like an Alistair or Kali or a Lumia for that matter. Just don't, guys, don't do it. Ozenka, I made a big deal about having played him in 1 game last time, and he was absolutely terrible. He's still absolutely terrible. And like I mentioned here, if you don't land Sandwraith, which is your ultimate, then you can't kill anyone, and that's not a good place to be in if you can't kill anyone without your ult. Your Dust Devil hits like 1 person, unless you're like you can't deal with 1 person jumping on you. Sand Punch doesn't really CC them for that long. Your Dust Devil hits them 1 time and goes away. Yeah, you need to hit him with Sandwraith, and that's your ult, and it's hard to hit him anyway. Omega, he can't really play the DS lane. He's not very tanky, so even if you get off your abilities, you're not always going to be able to stay in the front line for that very long. The one thing he can do is, and I don't think people notice this, I don't know how many people actually know this, but he can stun towers. So you don't need to pick Disrupt with him, or maybe you do pick Disrupt and you just have like the tower stun for all of eternity. But I mean, if you really want to be cheesy and pick Omega for that, then sure, but he's not very good in team fights. Last one, Wiro. there was a stream about like 2 months ago when I played Real, and he was the worst hero. He just was the worst feeling hero I've ever played in my life. Everything was super clunky. You could never get your charge off. You could never get your ult off. His like triple auto attack thing. It's like if you're not doing anything really. I suppose maybe I should switch to the support in DS lane. Maybe he's just better in DS lane because that's the only way you can actually use him is just to fight against fight 1v1, get your damage that way. But he was the most clunky thing ever. And the funny thing is, in that game, we won the game and I got MVP. And I just like, no, this is the worst hero. So yeah, there you go. Okay, that is my tier list. You can totally tell that I completely run out of energy. I do like to do these things in one take. I don't want to go back and have to edit it or otherwise, put it in a video editor for like hours at a time. So, or just to make like one little change. So, that is it. Thanks for listening to the end. Sorry I couldn't keep my energy for however long this is. But yeah, great. Good times. Thumbs up, even though you can't see me. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you hit the bell. Make sure you go to d2aov.com. I'm going to be talking about AWC stuff coming up. Make sure you don't mix my predictions for that. And I will be casting that event as well, so make sure you tune in to the AWC. And I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.